Brook does not get enough love, and I'm gonna try to convince you to love him. Brook had the great disadvantage of joining our Straw Hats immediately after we got Frankie, so we weren't ready for a new crew member, or at least I wasn't, and we didn't really know him before Luffy invited him to join the crew, which is nothing new, but he accepted. And then, yes, he was fantastic in Thriller Bark. He did a great job assisting the crew and actually doing really great work. In fact, it's because of him that we survived a couple of the things that went on in Thriller Bark. But then we all got pawpawed away and had a time skip. So Brook's time of entry to the crew gives him a great disadvantage. And on top of that, him being a support character and not a character that gets a lot of time in the spotlight makes him easy to kind of not pay attention to. Other than Whole Cake Island, I just don't think that people recognize how awesome he is, so I'm going to just spend a little bit of time talking about how awesome he is. For the sake of time, I'm gonna operate under the assumption that you remember Brook's backstory and some basic characteristics about him, but if you've forgotten some details, there is a video that I did a while ago, like a year ago, talking about Brook and Laboon specifically, and how I think that their story will tie into the way One Piece, the series, ends, and I did some summarizing there. I'm not gonna do it again. We see Brook constantly making light of situations, interrupting action or emotional moments or good crew moments, interrupting moments to insert another skull joke, or entering a scene to make another "can I see your panties" joke. And I think Oda did a really good job when we first met Brook at introducing his very awkward, off-kilter kind of humor and reactions to things, presenting this to us as a trauma response. I think that it was pretty easy for us to kind of see that him meeting someone and the first thing he says to them is, "Can I have a loan?" I love that one. Or people being scared of him because he's a walking giant skeleton, and him reacting with, "A skeleton? Where?" Which I think, I mean, like, maybe it was that he's forgotten he's a skeleton, but he's been through a lot. I don't think he's forgotten that he's been a stranded, solitary, dead man for 50 years. I really don't think he forgot that. I think that was him inserting his humor again, trying to make light of a really intense moment, people being horrified at the sight of him, terrified at what he is, and he just cracks a joke. Because that's what he does. That's a main attribute of his, is to constantly be cracking jokes to ease tension. And in the midst of fear or terror or conflict, he constantly is laughing, making jokes, and generally trying to lighten the mood. Anyway, I think Oda did a really good job here at the beginning of showing us that his burping and farting at the dinner table and making a huge mess and not using silverware and all the things that he did at the beginning when we first met him were just the result of a guy who's been stranded alone for 50 years. That he's forgotten how to interact with humans and that he's kind of messed up. Anyway, these things about Brook, him constantly having a positive attitude and a level head in the midst of fear, terror, obstacles, really emotional moments, him constantly keeping a positive attitude and cracking jokes and making light of situations, I think is a survival technique that he's developed over the time being alone. Brook had to leave a friend behind. He watched his friends die. He had no way to get out of this situation. He was isolated on a directionless boat surrounded by his friends' corpses. And when he finally did find land, his shadow was stolen and he was just stranded there too. I think being isolated for 50 years with nothing but the constant reminder that all your friends are dead and you have no way to get back to the one friend who you asked to wait for you, having a positive attitude, having an overly chipper, looking on the bright side kind of response to everything, as well as cracking jokes constantly, I think it had to be a survival technique that he developed in order to survive this dark, dark, dark time in his life. I mean, when you think about the fact that the man sailed aimlessly, isolated with his friends' corpses for a longer period of his life than he was able to actually live his life, it's unsurprising to me that his jokes are inserted at inappropriate times, or that his humor can be overbearing or off-kilter or disruptive at times. When he sees conflict, his natural response is positivity and jokes, because that's what he had to survive on. That's what he had to keep himself going during this really, really dark time. But despite his constant jokes, you can clearly see the pain that he holds in him every moment of the day. Pink Sake is an upbeat, chipper, happy song, but there's a darker, sadder story behind it. The guilt he holds for leaving a friend behind for so long, and the suffering that friend faced because of it. The pain from his past that allows him to see through illusions because he knows the stark reality of life. His constant joy is a survival technique that he developed, but it's not reflective of the suffering that he holds inside of him. I think his soul powers are a thing that I could easily dig probably far too deeply into, that I can look into more deeply than I probably should. During the time skip, everybody got a level up, right? His was that he developed his soul powers a little bit more. He realized that he could get his soul outside of his body and be able to spy, attach his body if he's had his head knocked off. His ice powers, where he pulls from the underworld, the coldness from the underworld, and infuses it with his sword. He developed these powers. He realized the extent of the abilities that his devil fruit gives him through praying during the time that they were apart. And one would think that over 50 years of sailing aimlessly, isolated with nothing but corpses surrounding you, desperately wanting to get back to the one friend who might still just be waiting, thinking that they've been abandoned by you, you would think he might have prayed. You would think he might have tried to explore his abilities to see if there was something, anything within himself that could help him get off this boat. But somehow he didn't. Somehow he discovered it during the time skip. He discovered all this during the time skip, but not the 50 years before it. And it's very possible that Oda just wanted to give Brook a level up too and didn't care about the implications of his past in giving him this level up now. That's certainly possible, but this is an analysis video, so I'm gonna go ahead and read too much into it. I think that he faced a tremendous amount of despair during that 50 years of isolation, and the humor and the jokes and the chipper attitude were a defense mechanism to keep him alive, but he didn't actually have very much hope. He was just trying to survive. And when he met this crew and was instantly incredibly loyal to them, I think the reason his loyalty was so at max from the start was, one, because he's an extremely loyal character. That's obvious with the loyalty that he shows towards Laboon after all this time, but also because they restored his hope. I think he was completely hopeless during that time, just floating aimlessly on the water with no end in sight. How do you keep hope in that? And knowing that now he had a way to get off the boat, that he had a future that he could have, and that Laboon was still waiting for him so he could be reunited with this family that he's chosen, restored his hope, which means that when he was isolated once again, immediately after getting off that boat, he just goes straight back into captivity. That boat was a form of captivity. He finds family and hope again, and then is immediately isolated from them again and put into a new form of captivity. Imagine what that would do to a person. But instead of letting that cause him to completely unravel all over again, instead he tapped into that newfound hope and he said, let me explore my abilities now, because I know that I'm gonna get out of this one too, and I'm gonna be stronger for it. I think that says a lot about his character. I think that says a lot about the what's going on inside of him, that this time, instead of breaking and saying there's no hope for my life, no matter what I do, where I go, I will once again be alone, captive with no freedom. Instead of descending to that same point that he was in for 50 long years, instead of that, he retained his hope and explored his abilities so that he could become stronger and more able. Do you know what kind of strength that takes? He clung to that hope. He clung to that newfound family, his nakama, the Straw Hats, and he clung to the reality that he will be able to get back to Laboon, even though this situation here looked hopeless all over again. Now he chose to explore his abilities to the greatest extent. I think that says so much about the state of mind that he was in when he was stranded at sea and now being stranded once again, but with hope. All right, now let's talk about his current interactions with the crew and his current role in this crew. Brook was, before he met the Straw Hats, apparently some sort of leader of something. He was also a captain of the Rumba Pirates, and during the time skip, he became a famous rock star. Basically, in every situation that he gets himself into, he ends up in a role of leadership and a role of importance where people look up to him and people trust him. And yet, when he's a member of the Straw Hat Pirates, he happily takes the role of a side character, of a support character. One would think that someone who was previously a captain and is now a rock star, a well-renowned rock star, would have a bit of an ego. And I think that that would be understandable. When you've been in a leadership role where people look up to you, it's kind of hard to be one of the least important characters on your new crew. But he's fine with it. He's totally okay with this role. In fact, he embraces it. He's strong and intelligent and incredibly capable, and yet it's really easy to miss all the significant things that he's done for this crew. From being able to figure out the weakness of the shadows on Thriller Bark, to seeing Zoro's nothing happen moment and also keeping his secret, as well as helping to keep Zoro's sword safe whenever they were being attacked. He regularly has moments like when he broke Mother Carmel's picture, where he's just in the background taking care of things that need to happen. He never takes the spotlight because he already has his dream and he's already working toward accomplishing it. And it's not about being the biggest or the best or the strongest. It's just about reuniting with his family and supporting his other family as he's on his way to accomplishing that. He's a character that you don't even notice because his support role is so effective. When action is happening, he's constantly saying, "I'll go with you," so that he can assist in whatever way is needed from him. So when those scenes happen, the people that get the spotlight are the people that do the biggest thing, but Brook is constantly there on the side, making it so that they can do that thing. And he's ballsy. He has some incredible lines when he challenges people. In a crew full of really powerful, strong, capable people with their own goals and who are excited to challenge somebody who needs to be challenged, Brook is always happy to just follow them, to just help them out, to do the things that are essential to do to make sure that they can have their moments. He very rarely takes the spotlight, so it's easy to forget how essential of a crew member he is. In most arcs, Brook doesn't play a huge role because his role is to support this crew in their dreams while he waits to reunite with Laboon, which I actually think is really beautiful and really noble. But I think my favorite characteristics of Brook are how level-headed, wise, and thoughtful he is. He's the oldest member of the crew. This is a crew of teenagers, and it shows. I love this crew, but they're kids, and they act like it. The way they go rushing into danger without any thought, the way that they just attack and don't think about strategy a lot of times. And you have your more mature crew members like Robin and sometimes occasionally Frankie, but Brook is one of the few crew members that thinks about the whole picture and responds to things in that way, which is why we oftentimes finding him being the sneaky hero, which is why we'll often see him rescuing his crew, but then not really thinking about it after that because he doesn't take the spotlight, but he does quite a few essential things that will make or break the situation. One of my favorite scenes with him was when he got the rubbing of the poneglyph on Whole Cake Island. Not because it was an awesome move and he came in clutch for the crew, but because of the things that he said. Luffy's only goal was to get Sanji back, and he'd do anything to accomplish that. Brook was thinking realistically because of what he suffered. that's what he does. Luffy may not gain his crew member back. He may lose this piece of his family. Life isn't all successes to Brook. He's known suffering. So he doesn't see the world from an I'm gonna brute strength this sort of perspective. He sees it from a more holistic standpoint. From the perspective of someone who has lost family and knows the risks at play. Even if we fail and we don't get Sanji back, I'm going to get this huge thing from my captain so that he doesn't feel like he failed all of us by bringing us here. He's constantly seeing the world from the lens that he developed in his suffering, and he's seeing situations from the lens of support. How can I make their lives better? That's the type of character that's easily forgotten or looked over, but that shouldn't be, because his role is so valuable and important. Finally, I'm going to circle back to what we talked about, his humor and his constant chipper attitude being a survival mechanism that he developed in his isolation. We're going to tie that into his music, because I think that a discussion on Brook wouldn't be complete without talking about his passion for music and the reason he joined our crew, because Luffy needed a musician. Brook values being a musician greatly. Part of his abilities that he showcases to us is wrapped up in music. He can penetrate people's souls and uplift them through his music, and he knows how valuable that is in a world and in a task like being a pirate that is going to be met with opposition and potential pain. He knows how important it is to keep people's hope alive in the midst of despair. His role as a musician is important to him because he's suffered and he's seen pain, and he knows how valuable uplifting people's spirits through music in the midst of that pain was to him and will potentially be for his own crew. He's happy to be a background character. He's happy to be a support because he knows that his role as a jokester, as someone who makes the mood light, as someone who reminds people to laugh, and as someone who uplifts people with music, he knows how essential that can be. He knows that sometimes that's the only thing that keeps you alive. Brook is an incredibly loyal, kind-hearted, thoughtful, wise, goofy character. He can be intrusive and offbeat and not easy to process at times. I think knowing him in real life, constantly inserting jokes in serious moments, could be really annoying. But I mean, they would all be annoying in real life. But I think there's a deeper layer to basically everything that he does and everything that makes him who he is, why he responds to the world as he does. And I think that there's so much value in what he provides to the crew. I've seen people say, we already have a swordsman, so why do we need Brook? We already have a perv, so why do we need the panty jokes? But I think that his role as someone who sees the world in a more stark and realistic, less doe-eyed manner allows him to be the support character that oftentimes we need, is essential to our survival. His role as someone who constantly says, I'll go with you, I'll assist, is one that's easily overlooked, incredibly valuable, and shows so much of his character as an individual. And I love him. I adore his character. I was not sold on him when I met him on Thriller Bark, not in the slightest, but he's a character that I have grown to love so much, and that I had a lot of fun examining more deeply with you, even though I'm probably reading too much into a lot of it. I stand by it all. But what do you think of Brook? Do you like him? Do you not like him? Are there aspects about him and moments that I didn't cover in this video that you want to dig into more in the comments? I love his character deeply. He's one of my top 5 Straw Hats. I don't know how I would rank them at the moment, but he's definitely in the upper half of my Straw Hat ranking. He doesn't get enough spotlight in the series, but I like to think that that's intentional because he doesn't seek the spotlight at all. He just seeks to make sure that his crew makes it out alive. And he has done an extraordinary job at that, and I love him. Anyway, please keep chatting with me about Brook in the comments. What do you love about him? What do you hate about him? Did this video even slightly make you like him more? I hope it did. I post videos every Monday and Friday on this channel. Next week, when we do our chapter reviews for the last batch, I am going to speak specifically on Brook and some things that happened recently that I can read way too deeply into again. So be on the lookout for that. I post videos every Monday and Wednesday on this channel, Tuesdays and Thursdays on the second channel, where I talk about what I've been reading, do more book reviews and manga reviews. We're talking about Vagabond, me and Philip. Talking about Vagabond now. Check out my Patreon if you want to see weekly reading chapter live streams. Or don't. I'll see you again soon. Bye.